What kind of man mocks his own sister in front of 200 guests and calls it a toast? That was the moment I knew. I never really had a brother. My name is Elise. I'm 36, a single mom, and the person my family likes to forget exists until they need someone to blame. I showed up to my brother Ethan's wedding, dressed modestly, sitting quietly in the back row with my 8-year-old son. I didn't come for attention. I came because somewhere deep down, I still held out hope that maybe today I'd finally be seen as part of this family. Instead, I watched my brother raise a glass, look straight at me, and turn my life into the punchline of his wedding speech. He said I was the queen of resilience because I'd survived being abandoned, jobless, and alone. The room laughed. My mother smirked. My son's hand tightened in mine. But what they didn't know was that the bride had been watching too, and she wasn't laughing. When she picked up the microphone, everything changed. I wasn't supposed to be there. The invitation came late, printed hastily, no handwritten note, just my name in cold font. Elise Miller plus guest. No mention of Leo. No dear sister. But I still came, not because I expected warmth, not because I believed anything had changed. I came because Leo, my 8-year-old son, had asked, "Do we get to go too, Mom? Like a real family?" And how do you explain to a child that sometimes blood doesn't come with love? I told him yes, because I wanted it to be true. The venue was everything I imagined Ethan's wedding would be. Grand chandeliers, waiters in white gloves, centerpieces taller than Leo. The kind of place that smells like money and expectation. We arrived early. I dressed Leo in the little navy suit I'd saved 2 months to buy. He looked like a tiny prince. Me, I wore the only decent dress I had, heels that pinched, and earrings that hadn't seen daylight since before I became a mother. Our place card read, Table 14, near the restroom, far from the family table. I smiled politely at strangers, while my mother and Ethan held court at the front like royalty. No one came over to greet us. No one offered a hug or a "glad you came." Ethan walked past once, looked right at me, and gave a nod. A nod. Like I was a neighbor he half recognized. I felt my spine stiffen. Leo tugged at my hand, eyes wide with wonder. "Mom, is this like a movie, with all the lights and flowers?" I bent down and smiled. "Yeah, like a fairy tale," he grinned. "Then Aunt Natalie's the princess, right?" "Exactly," I said, my voice catching. And maybe for a moment, I wanted to believe in that fairy tale too, that today might be different, that maybe Ethan would finally acknowledge me, that maybe our mother would look at Leo and say, "You've grown so much, sweetheart." But no one said anything. Natalie, the bride, hadn't even looked my way. She was radiant, floating through the crowd like she was born to wear white and silence. I didn't blame her. She barely knew me, but my family did. And yet, I sat there like a ghost in a rented chair. Leo reached for the bread rolls with excitement. "Do you think they'll have cake, Mom?" "Definitely," I said, brushing crumbs from his lap. Inside, I was unraveling. I shouldn't have come, but I did, because a part of me, foolish, desperate, hopeful, still believed that being present might mean being seen. I looked toward the head table one last time. Ethan threw his head back in laughter beside our mother. And I knew I hadn't just been forgotten. I'd been erased. Dinner ended with silver forks scraping plates and laughter bubbling over half-empty glasses of wine. The servers moved like dancers, trained, invisible, perfect. Leo licked icing off his spoon, completely mesmerized by the chocolate fountain. He had no idea what was coming. The MC tapped the mic. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the toasts. My stomach twisted. I knew that voice, overly cheerful, perfectly rehearsed. I reached for my water, the condensation making the glass slip slightly in my hand. Ethan stood first. Of course, the groom, the golden boy. He rose slowly, smiling, his champagne flute catching the soft glow of the chandelier. Thank you all for being here today, he began, voice smooth as satin. It's a dream come true to be surrounded by friends, family, and even those who don't usually show up unless there's a free meal involved. Laughter, light at first, then rolling. My fingers tightened around my glass. Leo looked up at me, confused. I forced a smile. Just a silly joke, I said quietly. But Ethan wasn't done. And of course, he added, turning his gaze casually in my direction, my sister Elise, a woman who truly redefines the term survivor. She's been through it all. Bad choices, worse men, 2 jobs, and still living in that tiny studio above a laundromat. Or is it a shoebox now? Laughter, this time louder, more relaxed. My face burned. He was actually doing this. Here. Now. Still, Ethan continued, grinning. She showed up. That's commitment. Or maybe just habit. Either way, thanks for making the trip. I couldn't breathe. Leo tugged on my sleeve. Mom, are they talking about you? I swallowed. My throat was dry. Yes, I said. But why are they laughing? I didn't answer. I couldn't. At the head table, my mother leaned in toward her friends and, with the clarity of someone who wanted to be heard, said, She's used goods, but at least she cleaned up okay. Another burst of laughter, cruel and unfiltered. Something inside me cracked. I stared straight ahead, willing myself not to cry, not to blink. The lights blurred, the room warped. The clinking of glasses became white noise. No one stopped it. No one said, That's enough. Not one hand reached for mine. Not one voice said my name with kindness. And in that moment, I wasn't just Elise. I was a spectacle, a lesson, the joke that everyone agreed was safe to laugh at. My son was still holding my hand, still watching, and that's what hurt the most. Not the humiliation, not even the betrayal, but the fact that my child was learning in real time just how easy it was for the world to treat his mother like nothing. I stood up, not all at once, more like a slow unraveling, my knees stiff, my spine trembling. The fabric of my dress clung to my back with cold sweat. I heard the scrape of my chair echo on the marble floor, louder than the laughter, too loud. Leo looked up at me, his small hand still clutched in mine. Are we leaving? He asked, voice soft. I nodded. Yes, baby, we are. I didn't look at anyone. I didn't scan the room for faces. I didn't wait to be stopped. I had nothing left to collect here. We began walking, between tables dressed in velvet, past guests whose laughter had faded to awkward silence, then quiet curiosity. They didn't say a word. Some turned their eyes away, some didn't. I was halfway to the door when I heard a chair push back, a loud screech against tile, then a voice, soft but distinct. Elise, don't go. I stopped. The room didn't. Glasses still clinked. The DJ adjusted something on his console. But that voice held the air hostage. I turned. Natalie, the bride, still in her white gown, still flawless, still composed, but her face had changed. She stood behind the head table, her hands flat on the surface, eyes not on Ethan, not on the crowd, but on me. Elise, she repeated gently, don't leave yet. Ethan rose behind her. Natalie, what are you doing? Don't make this a thing. She ignored him. She picked up the mic, and something shifted in the air. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud, but it was seismic, like the subtle tilt of the earth before a quake. She looked around the room, once slowly, and then back at me. "I need to say something," she began, voice clear, unwavering, "because apparently no one else here will." My breath caught in my throat. Leo moved closer to me. His hand reached for my arm, gripping it like he could feel what was coming. Natalie stepped out from behind the table. She stood in the open now, bride, host, witness, and executioner. "I watched someone get humiliated tonight," she said. "Not a stranger, not a joke, a woman, a mother, a sister." The room went still. Even the DJ stopped the soft background music. And I watched everyone let it happen. Gasps. A few heads turned toward Ethan. He froze, pale. Natalie's grip tightened around the mic. "I thought I was marrying a good man, a kind man. But if this is how he treats his own sister, what kind of husband would he be to me?" Silence. She turned back to me. And in that moment, I knew something I hadn't felt in years. I was no longer alone. I won't marry someone who finds it funny to shame a woman just for surviving. Natalie's voice didn't rise. It didn't tremble. It cut. Clean, deliberate, final. Ethan stepped forward, trying to laugh it off. "Nat, come on. It was a joke. You're blowing this way out of—" "No," she snapped, for the first time sharp. "You don't get to tell me how to feel about cruelty." You could hear a pin drop. Even the waitstaff froze mid-step. A wine bottle remained uncorked in a trembling hand. Natalie turned to the crowd. Her veil fluttered as she moved, like even the dress wanted to flee. I watched Ethan mock his sister, Elise, who came here alone, who brought her child, who sat quietly and never asked for anything. She looked toward me again. "You didn't deserve that. None of it." I couldn't move. I stood there, still holding Leo's hand, trying to breathe through the knot in my throat. "I've made a mistake," Natalie said, lifting her hand and slowly sliding off the engagement ring. "This wedding, this fairy tale, it's fake, and I won't pretend anymore." She placed the ring on the table, right next to Ethan's untouched champagne glass. "I'm not walking into a marriage where cruelty gets served with champagne." She stepped down from the platform, high heels clicking across the polished floor. No one dared follow. Not her bridesmaids, not Ethan, not even his mother, who sat with her lips pressed so tightly they turned white. As Natalie walked past our table, she met my eyes for the first time and said, just loud enough for me to hear, "You didn't need saving," but they needed to see someone say it. And then she kept walking. And just like that, like a single match to dry silk, years of pretense, hierarchy, and carefully curated image turned to smoke. I turned toward the head table. Ethan hadn't moved. His mouth was slightly open, like he was still waiting for someone to laugh and make it all okay. My mother was already whispering furiously to an aunt. I didn't care. Leo whispered, "Did she just stop the whole wedding?" I looked down at him. "Yes," I said. "She stopped pretending." For the first time in my life, someone had stood on a stage I'd never been allowed to step onto and told the truth, not just for me, but about them. No one stopped us. As Leo and I made our way through the grand hall, no one dared speak. People shifted in their chairs like ghosts. Some stared down at their plates. Some stared at me, no longer with amusement, but with something else. Shame, maybe, or guilt. I didn't need either. I walked slowly, hand in hand with my son, past tables of people who had once laughed at me and now couldn't meet my eyes. When we stepped outside, the cool night air hit like a balm. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. In the car, Leo buckled his seatbelt without a word. He looked out the window, then turned to me. "Mom, are we okay?" I nodded. "Yeah, baby, we're okay now." The drive home was quiet. No music, no talking, just the hum of the tires and the soft sound of Leo's fingers drumming against his seat. We passed expensive buildings, city lights, and people heading into restaurants where no one knew their stories. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to shrink to fit inside the world. When we reached our apartment, I unlocked the door with hands that were no longer trembling. Leo kicked off his shoes, yawned, and curled up on the couch with his old stuffed bear, the one I'd stitched back together more times than I could count. I sat beside him. Neither of us said much. There wasn't anything left to explain. But after a while, Leo leaned his head on my shoulder and whispered, "She was really brave, huh? The lady in the dress?" "She was," I said. "She told the truth, out loud." He was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Does that mean we're not the problem anymore?" That one hit hard. I looked at him, his wide, searching eyes, and said the one thing I wish someone had told me years ago. We were never the problem. Later that night, after brushing his teeth and tucking him into bed, I stood in the doorway, watching him sleep. His face was peaceful, untouched by the cruel laughter of hours before. I whispered, "I'm sorry you had to see that." But deep down, I was glad he had, because he'd also seen something else. He'd seen that silence isn't the only way to survive. That sometimes someone does stand up, that you don't always have to swallow it. That night, I didn't cry. I just sat at the kitchen table, made myself a cup of tea, and let the quiet wrap around me. Not like a prison this time, but like a choice. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't invisible. I had been seen, not just by a bride in white, but by the person who mattered most, my son. The days that followed were strangely quiet. No calls from Ethan, no apology. Not that I expected one. My mother texted once, "You embarrassed this family in front of everyone. I hope you're proud of yourself." I read it, smiled softly, and deleted it. I didn't feel proud. Not in the loud, triumphant way people talk about. I just felt steady, and that was enough. A few days later, someone slid a bouquet under our door. No roses, no wrapping, just wildflowers, lavender, daisies, sprigs of something purple and stubborn. Tucked inside was a small card, "To the woman who stood when others laughed." There was no name. I didn't need one. Life returned to its rhythm. Morning shifts at the cafe, evening check-ins at the hotel, Leo back at school, asking questions about clouds and fractions and why adults lie. But something inside me had shifted. I didn't walk faster. I didn't speak louder. But I no longer bowed my head, no longer felt the need to apologize for being in the room. One night, while folding laundry, Leo looked at me and asked, "Do you think we won, Mom?" I paused, and then I smiled. "We didn't win, baby. We just stopped losing." He seemed to like that answer. 6 months later, I passed by a bridal shop, a new dress in the window, white, sparkling, untouched. I didn't flinch. I didn't think of Ethan or my mother or what they thought of me now. I just thought of how far I'd come. Not because someone rescued me, not because I fought back, but because I finally walked away without needing to explain why I deserved better. Because sometimes real strength isn't in the comeback, it's in the quiet decision to never again show up to a place that demands your silence as the price of belonging. And if you're still here, reading these words, maybe you felt that too. Maybe you've sat at that back table, swallowed that bitter smile, held a child's hand and wondered, is this all I'll ever be? Let me tell you something I wish someone had told me. You don't have to win loud. You just have to leave with your dignity intact. That is enough. And if this story made you feel seen, even for a moment, hit subscribe. Not for me, but for every voice that stayed quiet too long. For every woman, every parent, every person who's ever been humiliated, then stood up anyway. Because silence isn't strength, but choosing when to speak and when to walk away is.